Hello everyone and welcome to my Bachelor Nation official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and gives this video a thumbs up. Jeremy Simon has kept a big secret from Bailey Brown on Bachelor in Paradise. Despite being in a relationship with her, he surreptitiously called Susie Evans and urged her to return to the show. Jeremy has also stated that he regrets giving Bailey the rose instead of Susie. The other season 10 candidates understood what Jeremy was hiding from Bailey, but they kept quiet. When Jeremy Simon appeared on Jen Tran's season of The Bachelorette, he appeared to be a good catch. However, fans are not pleased with his actions on Bachelor in Paradise. Jeremy has been labeled a loser, among other insults, for being nasty to the producers and keeping secrets from Bailey. Jeremy Simon went on one date with Susie Evans earlier this season. His friendship with Bailey Brown was still blossoming. However, he lost his mind when Bailey agreed to a date with Andrew Spencer. While Bailey and Andrew were on a date, he persuaded the producers to allow him contact Susie. Susie declined to return to the show and advised him to focus on Bailey. But Jeremy couldn't take Susie out of his mind. He once promised Susie that if she returned to the shore, he would propose. Most of the other season 10 candidates were aware of the phone conversation and Jeremy's continued love for Susie. But none of them told Bailey until Brian Otts got fed up and revealed the truth. Despite his deception, Bailey and Jeremy were able to resolve their differences. However, in this week's Bachelor Happy Hour podcast, Bailey stated that she is still processing what happened. The problem was more of not knowing that the phone call had occurred, and then, even worse, everyone else knowing about the phone call because it could have been so easily buried and not something that took over the entire season, she added of the secret that dominated the last few episodes. Bailey admitted it was horrible to see it back, especially because she felt her date with Jeremy was the finest she'd ever had. What Bailey Brown and the audience don't understand is why none of the other cast members informed her about Jeremy calling Susie. Especially Bailey's buddies, Alex Godin and Kat Izzo. However, Andrew Spencer pointed out that Bailey was holding her own secret from her friend Parisa Shifta. He rushed to social media after the episode aired to criticize Bailey for failing to inform Parisa that Brian had requested a secret rendezvous during the most recent challenge. Bailey declined the invitation, but Brian subsequently met up with her to reveal Jeremy's betrayal. She replied to Andrew's message regarding the situation with Parisa. Bailey defended herself, claiming she needed to process it before telling Parisa or Jeremy about Brian's invitation. Bailey went on to say that this season has been a lot on her mentally, and she wishes her pals would be understanding. Bailey Brown sat on the edge of the wicker lounge chair in the resort's outdoor common area, the sea breeze carrying faint traces of salt and coconut sunscreen. She could still hear the hum of the waves beyond the tiki bar, but her mind was loud enough to drown them out. The Bachelor Happy Hour podcast recording had gone live less than 48 hours earlier, and while she had been bracing herself for some fan reaction, she hadn't been prepared for the tidal wave of opinions flooding her DMs. Some messages were sympathetic, people who felt she'd been blindsided and betrayed, but others were sharper, calling her gullible or accusing her of not standing up for herself enough when it came to Jeremy Simon. It was one thing to live through the drama in real time on the beach, it was another to relive it in crisp, edited HD while the rest of America formed judgments based on 42 minutes of airtime. She rubbed her temples, thinking about how the whole situation had unfolded. When she had first stepped onto the Paradise Beach this season, she told herself she would be cautious, no rushing into things, no ignoring red flags. That resolve had lasted about a week, until Jeremy flashed that easy grin and said all the right things during their first late-night conversation by the fire pit. She hadn't known much about him beyond his stint on Jen Tran's season of The Bachelorette, where he'd been framed as the clean-cut guy who got unfairly sent home too soon. On the beach, though, he'd been charming, attentive, almost too much so. What Bailey hadn't seen, of course, was the quiet storm brewing behind the scenes. Jeremy, for his part, was sitting a few cabanas away, leaning back in a woven hammock, scrolling through social media on his phone. His own comment section was a disaster, half the fans calling him a manipulative player, the other half defending him as just following his heart. He had been in the game long enough to know that public opinion was fickle, but this level of backlash was new. Being called nasty to the producers stung more than he wanted to admit. Sure, he'd been frustrated with them at times, but he'd also thought they were on his side. The truth was, he hadn't set out to hurt Bailey. When Susie Evans arrived earlier in the season for a guest hosting appearance, flirty, confident, and with that easy Virginia charm, something in him had clicked. It wasn't even that he'd known her well before Paradise. They'd crossed paths at a charity event once, exchanged a few Instagram DMs, and that was it. But there was an unspoken spark, and during her brief stint on the beach, it had ignited quickly. Their single date had been lighthearted but layered, the kind where you walk away thinking, what if this could be something? But Bailey had been there, too. And she was open, honest, and grounded in a way Jeremy found stabilizing. When Susie left after a few days, he told himself to focus on Bailey. That resolve had shattered the moment Bailey accepted a date with Andrew Spencer. Watching her walk down the beach with someone else, laughing, holding her hair back against the wind, had triggered something territorial in him. He'd gone to the producers, frustrated, and asked if there was any way to reach out to Susie. At first, they'd said no. Then, after hours of back and forth, they'd agreed to let him make the call, just to see. He hadn't expected her to pick up. When she did, his heart had pounded so loud he barely heard his own voice. He'd told her he couldn't stop thinking about her, that he wished she'd stayed, that if she came back, he'd propose. He meant it in the heat of the moment, though looking back, he wasn't sure how much of that was desperation and how much was real intent. The problem was, Susie had said no. She'd told him to focus on Bailey, to stop chasing ghosts and give what he had on the beach a real shot. Jeremy had hung up with a knot in his chest. But the damage was already done, both in his own heart and in the whispered conversations among the other contestants who had overheard or been told about the call. For weeks, the secret had stayed buried. Bailey had no idea, continuing to grow closer to Jeremy. They had shared quiet mornings with coffee, afternoons in the pool, and long nights talking about life after Paradise. She'd even told him during one sunset walk that she was starting to picture this working in the real world. He'd smiled and kissed her, trying not to let the guilt show. It was Brian Otts who eventually broke the silence. Brian had his own complicated position in the Paradise ecosystem. He'd been on the fringes of several connections but hadn't fully locked down a relationship. After a private moment with Bailey, where he hinted at some things she should probably know, the truth spilled out. She'd been stunned, unable to process how everyone around her seemed to know except her. Thanks for watching. If you likes this video, do not forget to subscribe to my channel and do not miss any update.